And so, Nadira, it's a common conception or misconception, perhaps, that millennials are digital natives and therefore I trust everything. My life is out there in all media, and that's okay. And not that you believe, I'm not saying it's gullible, but it's just that there's a natural tendency to just go with whatever comes at you. Could you speak on that? Is that correct?
Yeah. I think the instinct that people have is because there's so much information out there, you feel informed. And that is the mistake. The more information you have in a lot of ways, the less informed you feel, because there's so much that you can't wrap your head around, and you're very aware of that.
Yeah.
So I think there isn't a ton of actual trust in this generation. There's actually much more skepticism.
Okay.
We're very aware of the fact that we don't see inside the machine a lot of times, of how much is actually packaged for us, and how much people lie. Even for this generation coming from the 80s, growing up from the 80s and into the 90s, you have this sense, even in our presidents, in our politics, in the rise of cable news, there's just a real pressing notion that everything is contextualized for you and not in the most trustworthy way.
So what solves the trust problem? What would motivate you to get involved, to give, to say, oh, I believe this news that's coming to me?
Yeah. To see impact. And I don't think I can underscore that enough. We are short on trust, we're really long on impact. So to the extent that you have data, if you can show the way that data is impacting people on the ground, that's where you can make a really huge difference. And Eric and I spoke right after I was at that conference, MCon 13 in Indianapolis, and one of the speakers there, this wonderful woman named Aaliyah McKee, talked a lot about the actual impact sort of idea that millennials have. And she made a point that I think is fascinating, which is that for older generations, if you wanted to show the impact of your data and the prestige of your organization, you brought out your VP of whatever else it might be. And this is the guy with the suit and the tie and the gray hair, and he's sort of the equivalent of a silverback coming to tell people the truth of things. And for millennials, it's actually very different. When they see that guy, when we see that guy, we think, I'm about to be pitched. And that's not a positive thing.
Got it.
What actually gets us excited is seeing the person whose life was affected, the person on the ground who's really able to have a different experience because of the work that a particular organization is doing. So show us that, and you build trust that way.
So that's one output on the surface, but what about the process? Is there a concern with, yes, I see one person who has been helped, but is there anything about process that would have you trusting more the data that comes out about social impact?
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges I find with all these social good sort of enterprises is that there isn't as much emphasis on the presentation of the work. And I really think that is something that millennials notice. It's an old saying, you get what you pay for. And for this generation, I think when we look at these enterprises, if we see a website that isn't great, we see a spreadsheet that's just thrown on the web, we see that there isn't great video or there isn't great insight being presented, the blog is old, the images look a little shady. Suddenly we're saying, I'm not so sure. And it's interesting because people have a tendency to think, well, isn't that just authentic? And really what it is a lack of concern. And that's not the same thing.
So whereas people would say that's just, millennials are concerned with the cosmetics, you're saying it's not just cosmetic.
No, it's not just cosmetic. What millennials really want to see is that there is care and attention to detail.
Okay.
Because if you show attention to detail in your website and in the packaging, but you're doing it in an authentic way and not showing us just the packaged superficial version of the data, then we can say, okay, this person's going to use my money well. They can be trusted. They are a legitimate enterprise approaching this work in a legitimate, credible way. And for that reason, I want to commit to them. So you have to really think about it as a 360 way of building trust.
Yeah. And so if I were to bring all this together in terms of informed decision making, and so I have data, I have it presented in such a way that not only is it trustworthy, but I can see inside the machine a little bit. What can you take me into the actual moment of decisions? What tips the scale when I'm looking apples to apples at people who have these things in line?
I think if everybody has, let me start again.
Yes, sir.
Across a suite of organizations, if they all have those boxes checked, for me, and for I think a lot of millennials, what ends up making the difference is what everybody else is saying. So this is a generation that listens to each other, and they have people within their social circles that they trust, the kind of trendsetters and tastemakers through social and IRL, so to speak, in real life, that they really trust. And so those people being able to be ambassadors for your organization and being able to talk about the good work that you're doing, whether it's with your volunteers or abroad or anything else, that's what really tips the scales, is being able to take it from an abstract to really showing the community and having those communities interact in such a way that a given donor or volunteer can really experience it in their own circle.
I see. And
it's Yelp.
Yeah. Like it's. I'm thinking for myself, but I'm going out into a community to test that. And so I'm hoping that as I try to wrap, that we've closed some gaps. Meaning there's a lot of shifting of major pieces as we all try to understand data and information. And I think myths are formed and they get tossed around left and right too. And this whole settling of the pieces.
Yeah.
And so I thank you for that. And matter of fact, if you could take me back to the title of the book again, Misled.
Yeah. Misled, How a Generation of Leaders Lost the Faith and Just What You'll Need to Get It Back.
Okay. We'll stay on the lookout for that. But thank you for that and for the giving Marcus for Good, that perspective on millennials,
My
data,
pleasure.
decision making. Nadira Hira. Thanks.